Okay. So welcome everybody. We might have some more people join us, but we got about 20 people right now. We are recording it, so I will distribute the recording to everybody. We're going to talk about winter hiking and some of the basics for that, answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to go through a bunch of different topics. I'll pause at the end of each topic to ask for questions. If you do have questions, put them in the chat. I won't see the chat while I'm sharing my screen, but I will refer back to it before I go on to the next topic. If you're comfortable, drop your message in the group chat with where you're from, and if you have any questions or what you'd like to get out of the class, and I'll hopefully try to answer everybody's questions and make it worthwhile for you guys tonight. So I am going to start with a slide presentation, and I'll be bopping back and forth quite a bit. I have a bunch of stuff to show and tell, and I'll stop the share, show you some things full screen, and kind of go back and forth. So tonight we're going to talk about Winter Hiking 101, and we're going to go over all the basics. For those that you don't know me, my name is Mike Radomski. I have two now 20 and 19-year-old sons in college that go on a bunch of adventures with me, a beautiful wife. I run the Western New York Hiking Challenge and birding challenges, and maybe there's going to be an Easter egg at the end of this for everybody in the area for some challenge information that you'll get exclusive rights to, exclusive access to. I'm also a whitewater rafting guide. I enjoy whitewater paddling. But my real passion is climbing mountains. I'm an Adirondack 46er, a winter 46er. Got my eye on a bunch of different other mountains that we're training for. Going to climb Mount Whitney this August. I've whitewater rafted the Grand Canyon, and that was incredible. I'm a licensed guide, so kind of out of the hiking challenge grew a whole nother business that I was never anticipating of doing classes, doing skills classes, and then those skills classes turned into guided trips. Think of it as I gave a backpacking class, and people still, even at that point, weren't comfortable doing them themselves, said, would you do a guided trip? And I said, absolutely. So we've been doing those for a number of years. The same things happened for Adirondack trips. We're now our second year of Adirondack trips. We're actually doing a winter one this year. So that part of it was never really anticipated, but I love doing it because, I love doing it outside and showing people the outdoors and pushing them, pushing their limits just a little bit to really experience the outdoors and get themselves out of their comfort zone, which hopefully for some of you, this might be winter hiking. Many of you probably hike in the summer, and winter you bundle up and stay inside, but for me it's my favorite time to get outside. So we'll talk about a lot of different stuff there. And this wasn't this year, this was last year, but the New York State DEC always puts out weekly ranger reports of all of their search and rescues and the reports that they get from hikers. Unfortunately, there was just one on that they weren't able to locate a person for 8 days, and they had to de-escalate the search. But this one was from last year, and I really liked this one because there's so many things that we're going to talk about tonight that this hiker did wrong. So they received a call from the hiker requesting assistance on Hurricane Mountain. The 40-year-old became turned around on the trail and was concerned about the impending darkness. The hiker didn't have a light source and not enough charge on his phone to use the light. He was improperly dressed in layers for the weather, did not have microspikes, a map, or a compass. So this individual made a lot of blunders that we're going to talk about tonight, and hopefully you guys will be more prepared than they were, whether it's going out into the Adirondacks or just to Chestnut Ridge locally, or any of your other local trails if you're not from Western New York. So if you're not from Western New York, I'd love to hear you post in the comments. So question out to the group. And you can chime in, you can put it in the comments, whichever you feel comfortable doing. But why is winter different? What are some of the things that we have to look out for in winter that we don't necessarily have to look out for in summer? So temperature extremes, yep. Temperature, short days, yep, very good, Mark. Our days are much shorter, icy conditions, which might lead us to different types of traction devices, right? What else? What else is different about winter?
Hydration.
Hydration, right? Water freezes. And we still need to hydrate because we're respiring all that smoke coming out of our mouth. That's water vapor. So we do need to, hydrate, even though we might not feel it. Dark sooner, yep. Early darkness, cold drains batteries. Very good. Yes, that is something that we're going to talk about. Oh, Krista from Southern California. Nice. Welcome. All right, so temperature fluctuations, right? Yep. And especially, when the sun's out, could feel great. And as soon as that sun goes away, it gets really, really cold. Good. That's a bunch. If you think of anything else, I'm going to go on to the next slide, which has some of the answers. Dealing with snow at depths. Yep. We've got a couple questions that we'll try to answer. So what method do you carry water that doesn't freeze? I will talk about that. And there was another one about strapping snowshoes to your bag, and I'll show you how I do it. Not always the right way, but hopefully it's a way that will, you guys can adopt. So everybody talked about bad things in winter. What's different about winter, which is always usually what happens, right? We could have cold temperatures, poor visibility, snow and ice. Could deal with frostbite, wind chill, drains batteries faster. Yeah, more dangerous to cross streams. Bathrooms are closed. You could deal with hypothermia, which you can deal with at other times of the year, but it's definitely accelerated in winter. But what about the good things, right? There's no bears, there's no bugs. If it's frozen, there's usually no mud. In our Western New York, we've had this really nasty freeze thaw the last couple of years. Hasn't been great. Sometimes it's easier to cross streams. Softer if you fall, right? If you fall into the snow. If you go into mountainous terrain, you can glissade, which is sitting on your butt and sliding down the mountain. You can have a lot of fun doing that. So for me, I love winter. We talked about a lot of the bad things, but there are a lot of great things to get outside. Other things that people say that they love about winter. So I always say no bugs, no mud, no rocks, and not a lot of people, right? So those are what I normally say. But if you've ever been hiking in the winter, it's very, very quiet, very, very peaceful. The snow insulates the sound. You see winter critters. You see their tracks where you don't necessarily see them in muddy conditions or summertime conditions. So you can see all the deer tracks and mice and rabbits and all the other stuff scurrying around, which is really nice to see. You also have much better views, right? The trees, the deciduous trees have lost their leaves. So some of those views on some of our gorges are usually socked in. But if you go in winter, you've got this, wide open vista. So, there are a lot of dangers, a lot of things that we have to take into account in winter, but there's a lot of great things in winter as well. Oh, we got Michigan as well. Great. All right, so the three biggest things that we're going to talk about tonight are the layering and how to properly layer in winter. We're going to spend a great deal on traction. And the other big thing is the length of day, right? We have to plan ahead for our the times that we're going to hike. We're not going to be able to go after work at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock because it's dark. So we're going to have to adjust our schedules and hike for that. So this is something I always talk about in just about every class, from wilderness first aid to hiking 101. that you want to pick a trail that fits your experience, ability, and the time that you have. And that's of the whole group. You want to estimate to be done by sunset, right? We don't want to be hiking in the dark if we don't, if we can avoid it. As you get more experienced with hiking in the dark becomes a little bit easier, whether it's an early morning start in the dark or finishing in the dark. But general rule of thumb, you don't want to be out there in the dark if you can avoid it. And also just remember, no matter what, your travel in winter is slower, whether it's muddy, light snow, ice, or heavy snow, it's going to be slower than your normal pace during other seasons. So planning ahead is a big thing to take into account. This slide is from the national park. It's kind of just reference. I'm not going to go through it, but again, always want to look at the skill, experience, the fitness level of your group and match the activity to that. And then any other health concerns, right? Medication, anaphylactic shock in the summer is a big thing, but it could be a big thing in winter as well. So does somebody in your group require an EpiPen or have asthma, or preconditioned to heart problems? So you want to know that thing. You want to ask those questions, whether it's in summer or winter. But this is a great slide from the national park to kind of summarize those things to think about. All right, so weather, we've mentioned, is probably one of the biggest things that we're going to have to take into account. And it can change very quickly. It's going to change throughout the day. It can change from if you're familiar with Western New York, if you live in the north towns, going to the south towns, you're going to go from green grass to several feet of snow. So always know what your weather conditions are in the area that you're going to hike. My favorite app for general weather is AccuWeather. I have found that one to be the most accurate. People will probably, everybody has their favorite. I've found with the guided trips and guided hikes that AccuWeather I can usually rely on. The other one that I'm really kind of using a little bit more is Weather Underground, for some historical data and for some point sources of weather stations. But general weather, I like AccuWeather. It gives a really good amount of data from cloud cover to wind, to hourly temperatures, the accuracy of snow starting in your area or precipitation starting in your areas is pretty spot on. So I'm pretty happy with AccuWeather. Another one that I really like, and it's really good for planning, especially if you're planning a couple days in advance. It's called Spot WX. It's not an app. It's only on the website. But what it allows you to do is, you can see it in the top right here. You can pinpoint where you're going to be or where your hike is. And all of those squares that are over that pinpoint are different weather models for that particular area. And then it gives you a whole bunch of data. You can click on each one of those weather models. They'll go from like 18 hours to 10 days or something like that. So you can pick different intervals of what resolution you want for that weather, and it'll give you all kinds of data from cloud cover to wind chill to humidity levels, a whole bunch of different stuff, amount of precipitation in an hourly graph. It really gives you a whole lot of data. And I do rely on this, especially if I'm looking at, it's Thursday and we're looking at it, hiking on a Saturday, what's it going to look like? And I've been pretty happy with that. And you can select each different resolution and different model and kind of compare and contrast. And each one has a lot of data to it. So I really like that website. It's been very handy for me. And then there's a couple other ones, and I hadn't looked at it this year. And the first link, which is the National Weather Service, they updated it within the year and made it a little bit more interactive with what their maps look like. And I'm going to switch to that link, and I'm going to show both of these because they're actually very good and I think pretty accurate. So let me switch to my web browser. hang on one second. I got to grab the other link. I only have one of them up. So if I'll pause right now, does anybody have any questions of trip planning, weather forecasting? There are some other websites that I enjoy if you're going to go out into the mountains. This is a kind of a beginner's class, but one that I rely on is called mountain-forecast.com, and that'll give you weather at different elevations for the given mountain that you're climbing. It's very, very handy. So I can kind of show that one really quick too. Let me switch back here. And it should share my Google Chrome browser. So like I said, this is one of the links this is the National Weather Service, the Northeastern River Forecast. And it's River Forecast because it's the River Forecast Center is what RFC stands for, because they deal with flooding. So they're looking at all precipitation. One of them happens to be snow. So what's nice about this one is it used to not be interactive like this, where you could scroll and zoom, but now you can actually see snow depths in inches in the different areas. So if you're going out to the Adirondacks, you can see their snow is much deeper in the High Peaks region than what we have today. In much of New York State, middle of New York State, almost no snow. You see the southern tier, Western New York, we got some snow. So this is a really handy tool if you're a cross-country skier, or if you're deciding, do I need snowshoes? Do I need microspikes? It kind of tells you, what those snow depths are. The other one that we can use is the National Snow Analysis. And if you click on the region, so we are the Southern Great Lakes if you're in Western New York, and you can kind of see what the forecast, they have a couple different maps here of snow depth, anticipated water equivalent, snowpack, and temperatures. So a lot of data is available on these two pages to just kind of go over and get a good idea of what the terrain is going to be, how much snow you're going to encounter in the location that you're going. Any questions on those tools? Let me show Mountain Forecast, which is another great one. So let's say we're climbing Mount Marcy.
Does the National Snow Analysis tell you how much snow is actually on the ground currently?
Yeah, this is snow depth currently.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a forecast. There are forecasts of snow on one of these, which you can look ahead, I believe, and see what it's going to be. And this one also has forecasts of precipitation. Forecast precipitation. So you can it's not as interactive as that snowpack one, but you can get a 72-hour precipitation. And Spot WX will also give you the hourly precipitation over a long period of time. So you might have to blend a few different tools together. But there are, the National Weather Service does have a ton of data in there. And then there's also, depending on where you're going, the National Weather Service has different stations. The one that I always use it because I go to the Adirondacks a lot is Burlington, Vermont is the closest one there. But depending on where you are, you might be able to find a station that's closer to where you would do the activity, and they do have information there. But I'll just show you real quick mountain forecast. So I did Mount Marcy. You can pick a mountain near you if you're climbing a mountain. But what I like about it is it'll give you, hourly. It gives you things at elevation. So this is at the summit, and you can see this graph of the different elevations. And there's a drop down. So if I want to see at the base of Marcy, it's going to be like that. If I want to see the peak of Marcy, it's like that. And you can see the drastic change in temperature as you gain elevation and wind speed. So that's a good tool if you're into mountain climbing in the winter. Like I said, this is a pretty big beginner class, but it's a fun tool to kind of play with. These two tools are, very valuable, no matter what kind of winter conditions you are, to see what the snowpack is where you're going. Okay, WeatherBug. Yeah, I've tried WeatherBug. I don't know why I didn't like it. I think it was more of an interface thing is why I didn't like WeatherBug. Like I said, everybody kind of has their favorite. I found that the Weather Channel app is much more optimistic than they should be in their forecasts, in my opinion, which is why I kind of rely on AccuWeather. Any other questions on weather forecasting?
What about Southern Ontario? Do you know of any weather apps for that? Because I think a lot of these are based in the US only.
Right. Yeah, there's the National Weather Service. I don't know specifically. I will write it down and look. Because there is a lot of hiking groups in Ontario. The Bruce Trail goes through there, and there's a bunch of climbing. There's got to be a Canadian equivalent to the National Weather Service that does similar types of data. But I will make a note of that. Give me just 1 second to get these questions, because I figure there's going to be some other ones that I might not know the answer to. Good question. Okay, we'll get back to the slide deck. Okay. And move on. All right. All right. So one of the other things important in winter and important in all seasons is to leave a trip plan with a trusted contact. People are one of the classic examples of this, a gentleman named Aaron Ralston, if anybody heard of him. There's a movie and a book written about him called 127 Hours, where he had to sever his arm off because he got stuck when a boulder fell on him in a canyon. All he had to do is tell somebody where he was going, and he wouldn't have had to do that. He didn't tell them people, and he knew nobody was coming for him. Nobody would ever find him where he was. So in winter, it's very important because of the risk of hypothermia, the cold temperatures. Everything is accelerated. All of the dangers are accelerated in winter. So it's really, really important to tell somebody where you're going and also when you're going to return. And always give yourself a little bit of padding time, because again, winter travel is always a little slower than you expect. So, these are the questions of one of the search and rescue groups in Vancouver, British Columbia. So why are you going? Where are you going? And when do you expect to be back? Give specific info of where you're going to include the route, what color clothing you're wearing, and what equipment you have. That can be pretty important for search and rescue. If somebody's looking for an orange shirt, or you say, well, I think they had a grayish white jacket on, it's going to blend in. So they might use different methods to look for you. Also, what kind of gear that you have. Can they expect you to survive a night, or are you going to be hypothermic that day? And what kind of experience do you have? So who is with you, everybody in a trip, and how you're getting to the trailhead, or if it's a point to point. A lot of times a parked car at a trailhead that's been there for a while might be suspicious to somebody. But if you're doing a point to point, you might be shuttling cars, and that car is perfectly fine there. You can also leave a note on your car with your itinerary, in case of emergency, contact information. It's also a good thing to do, but definitely leave it with a trusted contact. Those trail registers, whether you see it, we see it on some trails here in Western New York. They're definitely in the wilderness areas in New York State, in the Adirondacks, in the Catskills. But those trail registers aren't your safety. The rangers don't look at those every day. There doesn't see that you checked the box that you came back to your car. Those are only used to locate you if there is a problem. So your trusted contact is somebody in your family, a friend, somebody that you can trust that will make a right decision of, if you're not back in time, start, getting suspicious and calling the authorities. And those 5 W's and H, those questions on the previous slide, it can be pretty informal. It can be a text message to somebody, just letting them know all of those things, what's happening. And if you do use a digital method of communicating with somebody, make sure you get a reply from them, because there's been times where I've gone to locations, texted somebody, got to the location, looked at my phone, and the text never went through because I was already out of service as I was driving. So make sure you get a reply and make sure that they know what they've given you. So get that acknowledgement. And when you give somebody a trip plan, stick to it. Don't deviate unless you can contact them and let them know you're deviating from your plan. And this goes winter, all the times. It's a good thing to do. Okay, any questions on trip planning, letting people know, anything like that? Any questions? All right, good. So now we're going to get into the essential gear, right? We have our 10 essentials, and then we have some winter specific things that we're going to talk about. So let me move on here. So we have our 10 essentials. I'll go over these very quick. I usually do this in my hiking 101 class. So you guys hopefully are, kind of familiar with some of these, but we'll go through them. The 10 essentials is a system. There's not 10 specific items. Your 10 essentials could be 15, 20 items. They're considered systems. So navigation, a map and a compass, and knowing how to use both of those together. That's why, I was asked to teach a map and compass class, and it's actually been one of my most popular classes. I teach it probably 4 times a year, and it's at capacity each time because it is an important skill and it's a perishable skill. But we also have other navigation. It could be a GPS device. It could be our phone. Those are perfectly fine. I use them. Just remember those phones and those GPS devices use batteries. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is battery life in the winter is definitely degraded. So you may need extra batteries. You may need to put some of those devices close to your body to keep them warm. Sun protection. A lot of people don't think about sun protection in the winter, but it is very important. You have snow on the ground. It could be sunny and you have what's called the albedo effect. All those rays are coming and being reflected from the snow to you. So you can get a pretty bad sunburn in winter, and your eyes can also take a beating in winter. So make sure that you have sun protection for your eyes, sunglasses, goggles if necessary. And also sun protection for your face and your nose. I know I've gotten my nose kind of crispy on some days that are, really, really sunny. So, sun protection is still something to take into account for winter. Insulation, we're going to talk about a whole bunch, different layering techniques. So we'll go in more depth in insulation. Illumination is our headlamps. I always have 2 with me, and remember, you have batteries to manage in that headlamp as well. You may want to keep one of those headlamps close to your body as you're hiking, just in case you need it. Your phone is not your headlamp. So make sure you have some sort of headlamp with you with extra batteries or a second headlamp. First aid supplies. There's a few, small kits. I have a picture of all these things on the next slide. Adventure medical kits. You can get some good first aid supplies if you don't have a kit yet. Fire, I usually have 2 methods of fire, whether it's emergency matches and a big lighter, maybe some tinder, things like that with you. Repair kits and tools. These are a little bit more important in winter because now we have traction devices, snowshoes, microspikes, that have parts and metal parts that will fail and come apart in winter. So I always recommend having a multi-tool with pliers, because that will, and it just has to be a small multi-tool. It doesn't have to be a full-blown Leatherman, just a very light one. But I've used those pliers on more occasions than I've ever used a knife. Also zip ties. Those are a good thing to have, or small small gauge wire, just in case you need to fix your snowshoes or your microspikes. Nutrition we'll talk about a little bit more. I think hydration we'll talk about a little more. And then emergency shelter, it's what's called an emergency bivy is minimally what you should have in the winter. If you're going on something a little bit more ambitious, you may need a better shelter and winter mountain peak or something like that. You may want a bigger shelter. But these are, kind of what we're talking about for devices, right? For our 10 essentials. Map compass, sunglasses, different layers, puffy jackets, headlamp. That's what the adventure medical kit looks like. And they come in different sizes. So on them, it'll say how many days and how many people it can kind of support. So they're in different sizes. They come in a waterproof bag. There's a great starting spot, but make sure you know what's inside there and how to use everything that's inside there. And you might need to supplement. I do have a checklist on my website for this. The different types of matches and Bic lighters. And there's the small multi-tool. It's called a Gerber dime. You can get smaller ones from like Cabela's or someplace like that as well. Another thing that I recommend that every hiker has, and this should be every hiker in your group, is a whistle. A lot of packs will come with whistles on the chest strap now. Osprey packs I know do. Other manufacturers are starting to do that. But make sure you have a whistle somewhere on your shoulder strap. Because if you've ever been in the wilderness, and especially with snow, because it will deaden the sound, so does the leaves and everything else. Just a few hundred yards into the wilderness, you can't really hear that well. Nutrition we'll talk about, hydration we'll talk about, and then that last is that emergency bivy. It's pretty inexpensive. It's maybe $15-20. It's like a space blanket shaped like a sleeping bag. You can get different ratings for that as well, but it's definitely something that I would recommend everybody carry. They're very light and could save a life. I had a friend stay in a snow cave in one of those emergency bivvies on a mountain and survived the night. Was uncomfortable, but he survived. So going to some questions, Eric, I appreciate I'm assuming that was the map and compass class that you've taken. So thank you for that. That's a nice plug. And what type of brand of compass do you recommend? I forget the one you mentioned. So I have a Sunto MC2. It's a adjustable declination compass. There's other brands. Brunton makes a great one. And Silva also has some great compasses. I do have on my website, so when I send an email tomorrow, I have all of my specific gear that I have, and I have a link to those compasses in that my 10 essentials page. Okay, any other questions on the 10 essentials? We're going to go into a little bit more detail on like winter specific things with these, specifically with nutrition, insulation, and hydration. Okay, so technology. It already came up a couple times. Batteries do not like the cold. Lithium batteries, lithium ion will perform better than alkaline batteries. You want to keep devices warm. So if you're relying on that device for something, whether it's your illumination, your navigation, your SOS with a Garmin InReach or some other device like that, messenger, you want to keep them warm, close to your body, in your jacket, next to your fleece, whatever it is. So, do not rely on them because it is something that fails in cold. And the colder it gets, the easier they fail. So make sure you have those other skills, know how to read a map and compass. If your phone is dead, to get out of the trail, take that paper map with you. So you know where you are. Have those backup headlamps. Batteries definitely will fail in the winter. You can I have seen specifically like for GoPros, people put hand warmers around their GoPro. You could use a similar thing for some technology that you're relying on. You could use one of those chemical hand warmers around the battery or your phone or whatever. All right, so now let's talk about insulation. And one of my favorite phrases is be bold, start cold. And the key in winter is managing your temperature. And that means putting on layers, taking off layers, making sure that you minimize how much you sweat. Sometimes you can't avoid it. You're working hard. You know, snowshoeing is sometimes difficult, especially if you get into, deeper snow. You're going to sweat, you're going to work hard, but you want to try to minimize it the best you can. And the way we do that is with layers and with some of the materials that we're going to use. But one thing that I will say is the reason I say be bold, start cold is many times people will be nice and toasty in their car, get to the trailhead, step out of the car, and they're freezing, right? And they're talking with their friends, they're getting ready to hike, and they get really, really cold. They start layering up, and then 2 minutes into the hike, when they start working hard, they're getting hot. And then it becomes, oh, I maybe don't want to stop the group to take my jacket off, or I have to take my gloves off, I have to take my jacket off, I have to put it in my pack, I have to do all this stuff. It's easier to start a little chilly and then put stuff on because inevitably you will warm up as you hike, and you'll probably shed a layer even at that point because you usually need less than you think you need when you're starting. So be bold, start cold, and avoid cotton. And your cotton's okay in some other conditions, and in summer, wicking material is better, but in winter it's very important not to use cotton, because what cotton does is it keeps that moisture close to your skin, and now we have that extra danger of freezing of all that moisture next to your skin. So we really want to use wools and synthetics and not cotton in our layering system in winter. So to get away from cotton, we have different options, and depending on your need, your budget, there's some great options, and that's what's great about today compared to you look at mountaineers and people of the past, and they would put on 15 wool sweaters. What's great about technology today, and a lot of technology in our materials, is they are very lightweight and they're very warm, and they do a lot of things that materials back in the day didn't do, like wick moisture easily, reduce smells, do a lot of great things. So what options do we have? We have wool, and it's not itchy like it was in the past. Merino wool is probably the most common. A lot of people use alpaca, which is another type of material. There's socks and other things made out of that. But wool is pretty common. Merino wool is what you'll see in a lot of base layers and other materials. It's not itchy like it was. It does wick moisture. It's good for socks. Most socks are wool base layers. It retains heat when it's wet, and it doesn't smell or doesn't smell really bad like synthetics do. And then we have our synthetic materials. This is our wicking material, our performance, our ProTech, whatever you want to call it, type materials. They're great at wicking moisture. Those are our sports. They're durable. They're very breathable. They can even be waterproof. And then kind of in between those two, we have fleece. And it's tightly woven. It's good for wind. It's made of synthetic material. So if you don't want, if you're environmentally friendly or animal friendly, fleece is probably your best bet. I use fleece a lot for my mid layer that we'll talk about because it is so warm, and it is, it has that wind protection as well. Any questions on the materials? Pretty straightforward. They just keep getting better. And like I said, there's new materials every day. North Face and Patagonia are always coming up with new materials that are lighter, warmer, better weather protection. the wools and the alpaca materials are, really, really good. Our fleece is really good. It's come a long way in just a short period of time of how good that technology is. Okay, so now the biggest thing, remember I said we're always managing moisture and always managing our temperature to reduce that moisture. So layering depends on the weather and time of year. Our layering system is going to be different in spring versus winter. And our layering techniques are going to be a little bit different in winter, even. If it's going to be a 30-degree day versus a 10-degree day, we're going to have different ways of dealing with managing our temperature in those cases. But in general, these are the layers that we're going to want to think about. The mid layer is probably where there's the most variability with how cold it's going to be. But typically you have a base layer, and this is what they call the moisture management area, or more moisture management layer. This could be a wicking t-shirt and then a long sleeve merino wool. Could be just a merino wool, whatever your preference is. But it's usually a tight fitting, could be layers on your, a tight fitting tights on your bottom half as well, merino wool or synthetic. Usually tight fitting, and it's going to be that synthetic material or wool to wick the moisture away from your body. So that's our primary barrier, is our base layer. Like I said, the materials are really good nowadays. Then the middle layers are insulation. This is our fleece. Could be a puffy jacket, could be a couple different ways you can go about it. It could be a fleece and a puffy jacket. This is where there's a lot of variability depending on how cold it's going to be and how you're going about managing your temperature. And then the final layer is our outer layer. This is our shell. This is the wind protection and the rain protection. It's a waterproof. Sometimes they're winter specific. Sometimes, like, I will use just my rain shell as my outer shell because I have enough middle layers that really I'm just using that rain shell to protect me from the wind and the water. It's not really an insulating layer because I have enough on that middle layer. So as we look at it's a spectrum, it's a continuum of layering depending on our temperatures. And as I mentioned, in winter, it can be multiple layers. We could go from a 3-layer system with that base layer, that insulating layer, and that soft shell. And then we could go to like a 4-layer where we're looking at the base layer, a mid-weight insulation with like a puffy jacket, and then a hard shell on the outside. Do you start with all of those? Probably not. Are you going to carry them? In most cases, yes, you should carry, the hard shell with you. If you need the insulation layer, it's all going to be dictated by the temperature and, your activity, how long you're going to be out there, how deep you're going into the wilderness. So I hate to give an answer of it depends, but in this case, that layer system does really depend on you, how hot you run, how cold you run, the level of activity you're doing, and then, how remote the activity is going to be. But in general, we're looking at, in winter, kind of a 3 to 4-layer system. So there's a zoom in on the 4 layers if you didn't see it on the other one. So we have that tight fitting base layer. They're calling it a wind layer, an insulation layer, and then the hard shell. Okay, I'm looking at the chat if there's any questions. Any questions on that? Okay. Long underwear or cuddle dudes? Not sure what cuddle dudes are. But long underwear, yes, that would be your base layer. So that's that tight fitting merino wool. Could be the tights and then the tight fitting, long sleeve part of it. Also remember synthetic underwear for the same reason, is not to use cotton. We want to wick that moisture away from our body. Yeah, so layering on your legs is where you get cold. So there's a couple options in winter, and of course you can wear tights of this sort. There's lightweight, there's midweight, there's heavyweight, there's expedition weight. So your base layer has a continuum depending on what you buy of how warm that base layer is for you. And I have multiple. I have a very lightweight synthetic one. And then I have a midweight, and then I have kind of an expedition weight. And each one of them I pick, again, depends on the situation. So you can definitely put leggings on, and then pants over the top. But you can also pick pants that have fleece liners. I have a pair of Eddie Bauer that I picked up, and actually, if you go to Sierra, if you have a Sierra by you, I am kicking myself. I spent like $90 on these pants, and I saw them there for like $25. But you can get, pretty nice winter pants that have fleece layers that keep you quite warm. Yeah, so layering on my legs is where I usually get cold. So yeah, you can use that base layer, and you'll get a thicker base layer, and you'll have to experiment. And then also look at a fleece lined winter pant. For waterproof layers, how long does that last? Anything to restore the waterproofing? Yeah, it depends on the material. There is a wash, it's called Nikwax. There's a couple different styles of it. If you read the box, one of them, depending on how the waterproofing is on those pants, what it does is it releases the dirt on the membrane, which makes it waterproof again. So if it's Gore-Tex or something like that, there's a wash, a Nikwax wash, and then there's a waterproofing rejuvenator wash that you can use for your soft shells, your outer shells, your pants, whatever was waterproof in the past. The Nikwax wash it's Nikwax, Nikwax, and it works really, really well. I've done it for my shelves. You can do it for your tent and other things, and it will bead, the water after doing the Nikwax wash. Good question. So this is kind of my more or less of my layer system, depending on, I have that base layer, the fleece, may or may not wear pants because I usually don't get cold on my legs, but I do wear a fleece lined pant, a puffy jacket, and then some sort of outer shell is typically my go-to in most situations. And then another variability for me is hands and headwear. Again, it depends on the situation and what you're running into. I will go from, I have a little show and tell. I'll stop the share here, but I'll go from lightweight gloves to some heavyweight gloves to mittens. Mittens are always going to be the warmest for you. And the advantage to mittens is you can also put those chemical hand warmers in, and it's going to hit all of your digits. For me, I have very poor circulation in my hands. I get Raynaud's, so my hands will turn bone white if I get cold. So I'm always managing the temperature of my hands, because you get working, your hands get really warm, but you stop and you get cold. And that's what you're kind of always managing with all of your layers. You might just have that fleece on while you're hiking, but as soon as you stop for a snack, you might have to throw your shell on or that puffy jacket on because you don't want to get cold. You don't want to get that chill. Always a hat. And again, that'll depend. I have some fleece line ones. I have some just knit ones. The balaclava, which is this thing in the middle here from Outdoor Research, that's, heavy duty, blizzard type conditions. You're going to wear that in. And then a buff, and a buff is probably my favorite, most versatile piece of gear. So you can get a buff in a couple different ways. You can get just like a synthetic one, but you can actually get a merino wool ones for winter. And for me, it's a really versatile piece of gear because you can wear it, around your neck to keep your neck warm. If you get hot, you can pull this off, and maybe you need to, a lot of times your ears will still be cold, but you want to vent some of that heat as you're working. So it can become just a headband and vent some of that heat. Another way that I commonly will use the buff is to put it up over the top, and you do something like this. And I thought I had a hat with me somewhere. Where did my hat go? Well, I will grab one. I thought I had one here. Sorry about that. I'm sure it's here somewhere, but it fell. So I will, do something like this. That's one step of extra warmth. I also, I'm kind of building up to that balaclava. And then the final step is you can actually bring it like this. And a lot of people will kind of let this flop like this. You can see it's kind of, if I put this on, I'm pretty warm, but I got this floppiness here that kind of gets in the way. What you can do is if you pull it, you can roll this down like this and roll it, and see it creates like a hinge right here if you do that. And now I can put this up over the top, and now I don't have that floppiness. I can keep it underneath my nose or bring it up to my nose, and it's not flopping around. So, for me, again, we're always managing temperature and managing our sweat. Having something like this is super versatile because, as you can see, it solves many problems when you're out on the trail, depending on what those temperatures are. What I did want to show, I do use, multiple types of gloves. I have kind of lighter outdoor research ones that I'll kind of start with unless it's really, really cold. But I do have some heavy duty black diamond gauntlet style gloves, as well as mittens that will go in my pack. Like I said, I'm always managing cold on my hands. So, where I've spent my money on gear is on gloves. These aren't cheap, but they are very warm. And hopefully I don't have problems because I have actually had frostbite on my one hand, which we'll talk about tonight. So buff that. We've got a question for waterproof. Oh, we talked about that. Never mind. That was an old question. Any other questions? All right. Footwear. This is the next kind of different thing for winter. And I'm now going to give probably a pretty generic answer for this. And it's going to be a little bit of the depends kind of answer. I'll give some general things to look for in a winter boot. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go try it on. All of the major vendors, whether it's Merrell, Keen, Solomon, Oboes, all of them make great, great boots. And people kind of like the weather app, people will have their favorite, and nobody's tried all the different types of boots available. Maybe some have, but usually somebody will find one that fits for their foot and it's their favorite shoe. That's what they recommend on Facebook. But it's really, you got to go and try them on, go to your local gear shop, try them on and make sure they fit for you. But what you want to look at is a couple key things. Number one is waterproofing. So if you see a boot with Gore-Tex, that's a waterproofing material, waterproofing membrane. It's not insulation, it's just waterproofing. So you can have a hiking boot that has no insulation, that's not going to be very warm in winter, but it'll still have Gore-Tex. It'll be waterproof, but it won't be warm. What you want to look for is insulation levels. And typically in hiking boots, you're going to look at like 200 to 400 grams of insulation. And the insulation will come in different names. Thinsulate is kind of a popular one. Primaloft is another big popular one. But usually a winter boot, if it's designed for winter, will give you the grams of insulation. And it also might give you a temperature it's rated down to -20, -10, -30, -40. You may see 600 gram, 800 gram. Typically, those are in hunting boots because they're not moving a lot. Hiking boots are usually in that 200 to 400 range. Anything beyond that, your feet are going to be pretty warm. So look for that temperature rating, look for those insulations. Most of them will be waterproof, but also look for that just in case. Make sure it's Gore-Tex or something along those lines. And also size up a size, or a half size or a full size, depending on what kind of socks you're going to wear. So, you may wear a thinner sock and be okay. You might want to go in some colder temperatures, and you might want to move to an expedition level sock, and it's going to be a lot thicker. You want to make sure that you can wiggle your toes and bend your toes and move your toes all around inside of that boot with the thickest sock you're going to have. What you don't want to do is you don't want to start reducing circulation in your toes by having your sock be too tight and your boot be too tight. Now all of a sudden you can't move your toes. That's going to spell disaster for frostbite. You want to be able to wiggle your toes in winter, and you do that often while you're on the trail. Whether you're pushing down, you're stopping, you want to be able to wiggle your toes and make sure you have circulation going to your feet. And we do that by getting that half size or full size bigger in winter. Go to the gear shop with the socks, the thickest socks that you think you're going to wear in winter, and try those boots on with those. And good socks are key. I really like Smart Wool. I prefer Darn Tough. Some people like Smart Wool, Darn Tough. Both are very, very good socks. They're a little bit on the pricey side. They're like $20 a pair, but they are lifetime warranty, and they will replace them if they wear out or you get a hole in them or something like that. But they're very, very good socks, and they're, half of your comfort with your boot. Also, with winter, you want to make sure that they're compatible with the traction devices you're going to use. I'm going to show some snowshoes, and we're going to put straps over the top of our boots. So if you have really, really soft-sided boots, strapping those snowshoes on tight might hurt, and it might actually reduce circulation in your foot. So, I know a lot of women's boots can be on the soft sides, very expensive, very good boots, very warm, but the soft side might not be as compatible with snowshoes and other traction devices that you might be using. So I'd say try to avoid those if you can. A lot of them will have that reinforced toe, and some will have small rings on them in the front. And I have my traction device, but this one actually has a little loop right there that you can clip a gaiter to. And a lot of winter boots will have that. So I see a question on a backpack size. I'll take questions on boots as well. I will answer the backpack size. So like I said, it's a depends kind of answer, but those are the key things you want to look for in your winter boot. Okay, so backpack size. Yeah, so it's a depends kind of answer, how deep you're going to go, where you're going to go. But you do have bigger gear. It's puffier, right? You got to be able to at least carry a puffy jacket and a shell of some sort inside of that backpack, as well as your water, your 10 essentials and your water and that kind of stuff. For me, I just actually downsized to a 24-liter backpack, which is going to be okay for most situations for me, even in the winter. My previous backpack was a 33-liter, which was good for like winter high peaks where I would have a lot of extra gear, putting a lot of stuff in my backpack. I do have a 38 liter. This is the great thing. Osprey replaced mine because it was too far gone that they couldn't fix it. So long story short, I ended up going with a little smaller one because I have an intermediate 38 liter backpack that I would use for if I was going into the winter high peaks, let's say. For local hikes, day hikes, I think that 24 is plenty even in the winter. Okay. So now we've got our boots, right? We've got insulation in our boots. We've got kind of a hard toe. We've got not soft sides. Now we're going to talk about what we're going to use to connect to those boots when we need better traction. And we have two things available to us. Really three things we'll classify. We're really only going to talk about two. We have our snowshoes on one side, and then we have our microspikes. And unfortunately, good for Catula, but microspikes has turned into a term. It was a product name, but it's become a generic term across the industry, kind of like Kleenex for bandages. Or I'm sorry, for it's kind of like Band-Aids for bandages, Kleenex for tissues. Microspikes has become the Kleenex of the traction world. And microspikes are a Catula product, which is the company, but now people call microspikes everything. So there's a little bit of confusion, and there's a little confusion with the nomenclature of some of these, but hopefully I'll try to clear up some of it tonight. And then there's crampons, which I'll show you some examples of. If you're looking at crampons, you're probably not in this class. So if you're looking between snowshoes and microspikes and you're in Western New York, or maybe even some of those other regions, Michigan might also be the same, buy microspikes first. Invest in microspikes if you don't have snowshoes. So you can rent snowshoes. There's a bunch of places you can rent snowshoes from. We usually get a lot of freeze thaw cycles, and snowshoes are really only needed in a lot of cases on the popular trails on fresh days of snow. If you waited a day or two on the popular trails, they're going to be stomped down and you're going to be walking on ice from the freeze thaw cycle that we get overnight, where microspikes are going to be more used more often than snowshoes. So I always recommend buy those microspikes first, then look at buying snowshoes. You can always rent snowshoes if you really want to try snowshoeing. If you got enough money, buy both. So microspikes, as I said, microspike is both a generic term nowadays and also the product term for Catulas. So Catula kind of came out with the microspikes. They are rubber. I'll stop my share and do some. So it's this rubber top part with these metal chains and spikes on the bottom. So most of them called microspikes are shaped kind of like this. It has this rubber that goes on the top of your boot, and then these chains with some spikes on the bottom. Now, I do have what are called Yaks tracks that look something like this. It's got a rubber top, and it's got these kind of like springs going around on here. And these are great for walking your dog around your neighborhood and great for ice that's flat. As soon as you get into any kind of elevation with this, and I mean any kind of elevation, just a little bit of rise, these start breaking down when you're on slippery conditions. So save these for your dog walking, for your parks, things like that. They're not a bad product, but they're limited in the scope that you can use them. But what's great about these is you can use them, if you're in your neighborhood, which is like mine. Some people plow their sidewalk, some people don't, and you'll go from concrete to ice to concrete to ice. And these work great for that because they're not really aggressive. But on the trails, we're going to want to look at something like a microspike because we can dig in this toe on elevation and it's got just a little bit more aggressive spikes with it. So I always do this as a demo and it always fails. I'll try to do it the best I can because these aren't the easiest to put on when your foot's not in the boot. So I'll try to demonstrate putting these on by holding both. So what you want to do is what all of them have is what's called a toe bail on the front. And then some sort of tab on the back that you're going to pull over the top of the boot. And I will kind of share a funny anecdote with you. I think it's the one of these, yeah, the Hill Sounds, which is another brand. They have just L's, and that's actually the size, not left or right. I was with somebody, and they're like, "Oh, I bought these, and they gave me two lefts." And it's large is the size. So there's no left or right on most of these microspikes. It's just large. But there is this toe bail that goes on the front. So you want to make sure that that toe bail is set. And then you, like I said, this is the part that's a little bit easier when your foot is in there. You just grab this tab on the back and pull it up over your heel like this. And once you have that up over your heel, toe bail is in the middle. Now you have your spikes attached. And they shouldn't, you might have to, you could take your boots to the gear shop to try these on for sizes. They should be tight and they shouldn't be like flat, the chains shouldn't be like flopping down. They shouldn't be really hard to put on, but they shouldn't be loose on the bottom either. Once you get them seated correctly on the back and the front, they should be pretty tight on your boots. So those are the Catula microspikes. I'm gonna show you. These are called Hill Sound trail crampons. So this is where the nomenclature of these gets a little bit confusing because microspikes is the product trademarked by Catula. So everybody's got to call them something different. So these are called Hill Sound trail crampons, which I don't like the name. They're really not a crampon. They're a little bit different. They got the same rubber top. And the difference with these guys is the spikes on the bottom are just a little bit more aggressive than the Catulas. And they also have this Velcro strap that comes over the top of the boot to hold it in place. So depending on your conditions, both are great products. I've had both. I've used both in Adirondack mountain conditions. Both are great products. They're both going to last you a long time. They're both going to get you through ice and at moderate elevation on ice. If you're thinking about, if you don't have a pair of crampons and you want to escalate into bigger adventures someday, the Hill Sounds are probably what you should invest in now. If you think you're gonna, your trails are pretty moderate, not a lot of elevation, the Catulas are just fine. They're both about the same price. They're both about $70. So it really is just a use case. Both are going to work in most conditions. I prefer the Hill Sounds just because they are just a little bit more aggressive than the Catulas. And what's great about the microspikes is you can walk normally. You can walk with regular gait. You're not going to catch these spikes on your calf. The next step up is something like this. So this is a full crampon that would go on just a regular boot, not a mountaineering boot. There's steps of crampons that have specialized boots, but the spikes are way more aggressive. This is more for a higher angle mountaineering. Honestly, in the Adirondacks, there's probably 2 or 3 marked trails where you would actually need full crampons in some conditions. Microspikes will get you by on most of those, or snowshoes. like I said, if you're in this class, you're probably not looking at these, but these are crampons, even though these are called trail crampons. Really, they're all microspikes, but unfortunately, Catula has the trademark on the term microspike. There are knockoff brands. This is called Unigear from Amazon, and honestly, they're cheap. They're pretty inexpensive. I think they're like $25, but the build quality isn't as good as the Catulas. And as soon as you kind of pull them out and compare them, you can see that they're just a little cheaper made. But for most people, that'll probably get you by just fine. So I've had, several people recommend these and say that they've used them, countless trails for many years. And they've held up just fine. If you're going to be starting to do more aggressive stuff, invest in the Hill Sounds or the Catulas. Okay, questions on microspikes. We'll go on to snowshoes next. So you see how it's kind of confusing. We have microspikes, then we have crampons, but there's some overlap in terms. Okay, good. So now let's go to snowshoes. And there are definitely opinions on snowshoes. I'll tell you what my opinion is and what has been successful for me. There are other great brands, but I have been very, very partial to MSR snowshoes. I've had a pair for several years. It's gotten me up many, many mountains in very rugged, cold conditions, and they've been rock solid for me. So if I were buying snowshoes today, I'm going to show you what I have. I actually have the Lightnings on the right. If I were buying snowshoes today, I would actually buy the Evo Explorers. My previous pair before I had the Lightnings were called Evo Ascents that have an older style binding, but they're a plastic molded snowshoe as opposed to the Lightnings that has a Kevlar deck. I prefer the plastic. I just had to buy the Lightnings because I was leaving on a trip and I wanted the newer style bindings, and MSR hadn't come out with the newer style bindings on some of their Evo platforms. So I had to pick those. I've been happy with them. They're very good snowshoes. They're very light, work really, really well. That has some advantages, but just this year, they came out with what's called the Evo Explorers, which you can see has a newer style binding, toe binding, very similar to the MSR Lightnings, and they have the plastic molding. Now, there are other brands that have similar styles. The Helium, Atlas, and Trail and Mountain have those. And then Tubbs also has some great ones as well. But for your money, I think the Evo Explorers are about $220. I don't think you can go wrong with those. They're going to last you many years. There's reasons why a lot of places rent MSR Evo snowshoes is because they're rock solid. But what I want to show you is why I prefer an MSR style snowshoe or even these other brands, the Atlas Helium or the Atlas Trail, the Tubbs. They all have something in common. MSR was kind of the first one to start doing this. And if you look at these two snowshoes, see how MSR has this rail that goes all the way along. It has a crampon right here at the toe that you put your toe in. And then it's got this metal rail for traction. If you look at the tube style snowshoes, all you have is the crampon. And then you have no traction along the rest of the snowshoe. So the ones on the right, they're the tube style. They're good snowshoes, but again, it's kind of that same thing of they're great on flat ground, but as soon as you get any kind of hill, and it could be just a ravine, I'm not talking about a mountain, it could be just up and down a creek bed, things like that. They really don't do well because they don't have the traction. When you look at these MSR style snowshoes, they just have, so much traction compared to the other ones. So let me just stop sharing and show you snowshoes. So a lot of people ask, oh, I really want to get into snowshoeing, but it's, I don't know how to do it. And the reason is because they have in their mind the old style wooden snowshoes where somebody's walking, with these big weird steps and they've got these awkward snowshoes. And yeah, there's a learning curve for those. But modern snowshoes are not like that. They're very lightweight. You can get longer snowshoes. These are 22 inches. You can actually get them a little bit longer. It depends on your weight. For me, I'm 180 pounds. I've done some pretty deep snow. These guys have been rock solid. I rarely use the tails to make them longer. But what's nice about snowshoes is the boot connects in with the binding. So this is the older style binding. You see how they have straps going over the top. So when you're looking at your boot, these straps are compressing down and can cut off circulation to your toes if your boot is a soft-sided boot. So you want to have kind of a solid boot when you put them into snowshoes. So your boot just, it's just a regular style boot, goes into the snowshoe, and then it articulates like this as you walk. And walking in these snowshoes, a modern snowshoe, is just like walking normally. There's no learning curve. They're very narrow. They make usually a regular version and a women's version. The women's version is just a little bit more narrow to make up for a women's style gait. So you can try them out. But even if you don't have the women's version, the regular will be just fine for most people. You walk very naturally in snowshoes. The only thing you can't do in snowshoes, and I'm reminded of it every single season, is you can't walk backwards in them. So many times I've gone to take that picture and fallen flat on my butt. I'm always reminded every single year of that. As soon as you take one step backwards, you lose balance and you fall down. So that's really the only difference with using snowshoes, because the modern snowshoes are so comfortable that and they articulate. It's like walking in regular shoes. So there's really no learning curve. As soon as you put them on, you'll take 10 steps and you're going to be a pro snowshoer. Let me show you the other bindings up close, which I liked a little bit better. So if you can see these bindings, the boot slips in and holds the toe. It's a lot more comfortable and a lot more secure with these style bindings. And the other thing I would look for in a snowshoe, and again, this is kind of that future-proof thing. They're not that much more expensive to get this style. The mountain type snowshoes will have what's called a heel lift. So if you notice, I have this bar that will pop up and it will prevent my heel from going down. But if I turn the snowshoe like this, it'll make a lot of sense. So if I'm going up a steep incline and I do something like this, the snowshoe, by having this heel lift, it almost feels like you're just going up steps as opposed to a mountain or an incline. It really just feels like you're walking up steps when you have that heel lift. And it's really easy to pull it down and pop it back up. And you can do it with you'll get used to doing it just with your trekking poles. So you can do it at different styles. So if you have, if you think you're going to escalate some of your adventures, you might do some, places that have some elevation, invest in getting that heel lift. It's called a heel lift, a televator. You'll see them called mountain snowshoes. The mountain brand or the Ascent brand will have that heel lift. The regular trails will typically not have it. If you don't think you're going to do, any kind of, future mountain or inclines, the regular trail ones are just fine. But if you could see, even this one has spikes going along the edges and tons of traction for when you're going up and down just those little ravines. Questions on either of these styles? So if I were to buy today, I would buy those Evo Explorers with the new bindings, but the older, the plastic molded snowshoe, because these frames will last you 20, 30 years, I bet. Oh, where do you carry it? Where do you rent them? Okay. So there's a bunch of places depending on what your geographic is, but in Western New York, I'll speak for that because that's what I know. There's several places. If you join the Winter Hiking Challenge, I'll give you a list of all of those. I'll give a list after this class as well. I'll just give you that list. Gear for Adventure has them. A lot of the nature centers have them. Rhinestein, Beaver Meadow, Tift. Cummings, I believe, also has it if you're in the Finger Lakes region. If you do a program with Earth Spirit, they also have snowshoes provided. I don't know of any other Snowflake ski shop, I believe, in Lockport rents snowshoes. So there is a bunch of places, and if you have kids, there's public libraries that rent snowshoes with your library card. I will, as a follow-up to this, I will send an email with all of those locations that I know of. There might be more than that even. Other questions on snowshoes? REI in Rochester has them, yep. Yeah, there's another Fleet Feet maybe in Rochester. I think they might do it as well. I'll have to look at my list. I'll send you guys the list. I have the list between the two hiking challenges, who does it in the two locations. Okay. Are there different choices in quality when you rent? That's a tough question. I know, I don't know, I can't speak for what Rhinestein or Tift rents. I know Beaver Meadow has the tube style ones. When you go to Gear for Adventure, they rent MSRs. If you're part of the Adirondack Mountain Club, the local chapter has some that you can borrow. So that might be an incentive to join the club because you can borrow. I think there's 6 sets of snowshoes that you can borrow. Those are all MSRs. Okay. Very good. So just some other things just to go over before we go. Some other stuff, some other recommended equipment. Um, I'm a big fan of trekking poles, and especially in winter, whether it's with ice and microspikes or snowshoes, having trekking poles really helps. It gives you a kind of a natural kind of cross-country ski feel when you use them. Also gives you that extra balance. A lot of trekking poles have the tips that you can change to winter baskets, snow baskets. So you screw off your normal tip, put on a snow basket, and that's good for winter. Different kinds of hand warmers. I've tried a bunch of different styles. Really, the hot hands are probably the best value and longest lasting. I've run into some cold temperatures where the chemical reaction didn't happen very quickly, but usually those are, pretty solid. I've tried these ones called hot snaps that are rechargeable. You boil them to recharge them. They're pretty cool. They are very warm, but they only last for about 30, 40 minutes. You can also get Zippo. It's a catalytic flame and uses lighter fluid, and those actually stay really warm for a long period of time. So definitely hand warmers. Really, I would say the easiest is just using those hot hands. They work really good in most situations. Other things are gaiters. These are things that will go on your boots. As you can see down here, they have a clip, and a lot of winter boots will have a loop right there. If you don't have a loop, you just loop it on your lace and it works just fine. Outdoor Research makes some great ones. Hill Sound also makes some great gaiters. You can see they're just a little different. These ones have Velcro that comes across here. These ones are zip. Just a little different style. They're both about the same price. Both get rated very well. They're taller in winter. You can get shorter gaiters for other times of year, but winter gaiters usually come up over your calf and keep the snow out of your boots, which is great. Okay, safety in winters. So proper hydration. So we mentioned early on that water freezes and hydration is just as important. We sweat in winter, we work hard in winter, we still need to replenish both our water and our electrolytes. Every so in winter, we have that very dry air, and when we breathe out, that's that moisture that comes out of our as smoke as we're breathing is moisture that's leaving our body. So we do need to replenish that just as much in winter as we do in summer, and we might not notice it. And also dehydration contributes to hypothermia and frostbite. So if you're dehydrated, you're more susceptible to hypothermia and frostbite, which is where I kind of ran into a problem. And we need to keep our fluids from freezing. Using a Camelback or a hydration pack doesn't work in winter. The tube will freeze eventually. I've tried all different things. They make insulated things for the tubes. I've tried blowing the water back into the system. Eventually that tube will freeze and you won't be able to access your water really easily. What I typically do in winter is I carry two different things. I'll carry a Nalgene, and they do make commercial insulation pouches that you see in the picture here for Nalgenes. And then I'll carry something like a hydro flask, and you can put hot water in both. And having that hydro flask with some hot water will allow you, it's nice warm up to have some tea. But if your Nalgene freezes, you can mix the water together to get a little bit more water out of that. So I always usually carry two, depending on how long I'm going to be out. And a good trick with with a Nalgene, you don't have to have one of those commercial Nalgenes. What you can do is you can take your bottle of water and just put it in a wool sock. It works just as good. You'll be surprised on how long that'll keep your water from freezing by just insulating it in a wool sock. The other thing that I will say, whether it's a Nalgene or some other style of bottle that you have to take the top off of or just drink from, you're going to want to turn it upside down in your pack because the water freezes from the top down. So if you turn it upside down, you'll still be able to unscrew it, and you'll still have, if it does start to freeze, you'll still have access to whatever water hasn't frozen yet. So you do need to insulate it, whether it's, a bottle like this that's a vacuum seal. You can start with hot water. These are usually pretty good, even if you don't start with hot water. Same thing with a Nalgene. You can start with hot water. You can insulate it. You can do a commercial insulation, just a wool sock. But in this case, these you usually don't have to put upside down. But if it's a Nalgene or some other water that's plastic, put it upside down so you can access that water before it freezes. Do I recommend foot warmers? That's up to you. How cold your feet get. That's no problem putting those hot hands in there. I have a friend whose daughter hikes with battery powered socks. You can put those the hot hands, the foot warmers. They make ones for your feet. You could use either of them. I would suggest putting it on the top instead of below your toes because you are hiking on them. You want to have your feet clean as you're stepping. Your exam's Friday. Okay, other questions on hydration? All right, somebody learned at least one thing tonight. That's good. Thanks, Donna. All right, so proper nutrition. So in winter, your body is actually burning calories to stay warm. So we need more high nutrition than in summer. We're given the same amount of time that we're going to be outside. Just remember, like our water, our food freezes. So we do need to plan ahead. It's terrible trying to bite into a frozen granola bar. So you might need to plan your snack ahead by putting it in your pocket. So it actually warms up and it's not frozen for you. Same thing with M&Ms or trail mix. It's terrible if it's frozen. Avoid alcohol. So alcohol is a vasodilator. And when we get cold, what our body does is um, it constricts our vascular system. That's why our hands get cold, our nose gets cold, our feet get cold, because our body is trying to keep our core warm. And, as we get colder and colder, it's keeping more and more of that blood in our core. What alcohol does is it opens up those capillaries and vessels very quickly, which sends all that hot blood to our extremities. We feel warm for a little period of time, but that blood is now going to be colder than it was prior to having that alcohol. So try to avoid alcohol. On the same fashion, caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. However, you have to drink a ton of caffeine for it to have an effect. So having some coffee, having some tea, that's okay. Having tons and tons, having a Red Bull and a coffee and all that stuff, that might affect you and start constricting your circulation. But I've been told and read it's a ton of caffeine. Probably not really practical that you would actually get to that point. But I will mention that it's a best practice to avoid lots of caffeine. And always having warm soup or tea is always nice to warm the cockles, as my wife's grandmother says. And so just a couple other things just to look at for winter. Frost nip. So this is like very superficial. It's freezing of water on the skin's surface. Little ice crystals will go. We've all had this. If you've been in Western New York, when you get that little nip on your nose, or you start feeling it in your hands, you get those kind of tingly in your hands. Best thing to do is cover those exposed areas and get warm. Put heavier gloves on. Do things like that, get into shelter. And then we have, from frost nip, we get different grades then. We get chilblains, then we get to superficial frostbite, and then deep frostbite. And this is where when the cells in our skin are actually freezing. And we can only get frostbite when it's below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's above that, you can't get frostbite, even if the wind chill is below that. It has to be freezing out. So this is a very dangerous situation. It is exacerbated by dehydration. Remember, we said, dehydration is key to keep hydrated in the winter. So superficial, your skin will turn red and then, kind of gray, white, ashy. You'll still have feeling, but then as you get farther, you'll start to lose that feeling. So it'll go from kind of a painful feeling to no feeling. That's really bad, usually associated with hypothermia. So, we want to prevent it. So that's where we use our gloves. We use proper hydration, proper nutrition, proper layering, all of that kind of stuff. And then also being able to turn around if we get cold. Stuff that's also wearing, stuff that's not constricting. So all of those things will contribute to frostbite that we already talked about. And unfortunately, I've had frostbite. I had the superficial kind, even though it looks really ugly to the right. And it was my own fault. I have that predisposition of having Raynaud's and poor circulation. I was out for a very long hike in the mountains, the Santanoni Range in the Adirondacks. We spent the night, so it was like a 10-degree or less camp out. Long day of hiking. I was probably dehydrated. I'm predisposed to it. I took my gloves off to take some pictures, and I got frostbite on my index finger and my thumb. You can see it blistered and then turned really disgusting over the next few days. So it happens. It's a situation that can happen. It can happen to the best of us. I thought I was prepared and I did a couple stupid things and I paid the price for it. So don't be like Mike. So treatment of frostbite, if you suspect hypothermia, which we'll talk about in just a second, You want to rewarm. You don't want to rub frostbite if you suspect frostbite. Do not warm it because those are frozen cells, and all you're doing is breaking them when you start to rub them. So you want to rewarm it in submerged water. If somebody else can stick your hand, or some that's not affected can stick their hand in for 30 seconds, that's warm enough. It's not too hot. If there's a chance of it refreezing, we don't want to warm it, only warm it afterwards. And seek, if there's suspicion of frostbite, it's evacuation, get out of there, get warm and deal with that, see medical attention for that. But, seeing those first, turning numb, having some pain, starting to get red, may turn gray. That's when you want to start looking at evacuating, looking at putting layers, hot hands, all of that kind of stuff. The next other kind of thing that we want to deal with in winter is hypothermia to be aware of. And really, hypothermia can happen any time of the year. It can happen in spring, it can happen in fall, it can even happen in winter, depending on the situation, but it's a net heat loss from your body. So what we want to watch out for with hypothermia are two things. There's two signs that we want to look at. First is shivering. Early signs of hypothermia is uncontrollable shivering. So what is shivering? It's our body trying to move, right? Trying to create an internal furnace to warm our body up. So uncontrollable shivering is the first sign of hypothermia, where you want to start getting them warm, looking at getting out of the cold, whatever you can do. The next sign is what are called the umbles, the stumbles, the mumbles, the fumbles, and the grumbles. They'll start with mild hypothermia and moderate hypothermia, and then progressively get worse until possible coma, when they lose function of everything. So really, for us, hopefully you never get into a situation where shivering stops. That means you've entered into moderate to severe hypothermia. So that's what we're going to watch for. Also watch for their mental and physical dexterity. Those umbles are what we're looking at. Hypothermia can occur in any environment. It's worse because we have wind chill in the winter. We'll also have moisture because we're sweating. All of those things were going to make us cold very, very quickly, and it can become very dangerous. What we can do, hydration, right? Go back to making sure we have lots of water that doesn't freeze, and keep drinking and having good snacks that are high in sodium. Also taking our electrolytes will help us there. And then other prevention that we talked about already today is having that layering system, whether it's 3 or 4 layers, having the hot hands as backup, and making sure that you never actually get cold in the first place. This is just a chart, but it's from one of my favorite books called Vertical Aid, but it goes through the different stages of hypothermia. And the big thing that I wanted to point out is mild hypothermia, we have that uncontrollable shivering. And then once we get right to moderate, that shivering stops. And that's where and then we start getting the umbles, right? Slurred speech, confused, combative, disoriented. Those umbles will start coming in. So if we have uncontrollable shivering, that's a sign that we want to evacuate and get warm very quickly, because we don't want to get to the point of no shivering. Couple other things before we conclude and go through some discussion and questions. Ice. A lot of times we're going to encounter creeks that are frozen. I've been just in Western New York at Franklin Gulf, where I walked across the creek just fine. The person behind me fell through, and we needed to get him warm, and having extra socks actually allowed us to continue to hike. So know the thickness of the ice. Having trekking poles is also a great thing, because you can kind of stab that ice before yourself, and check the thickness as you go. So don't always think that you can walk across ice just because there's snow on it. It might break through. And now we have a situation. We have somebody in the winter, now they're wet with freezing water, And, hypothermia is going to happen really, really fast in those situations. So be very, very lean, careful as you're going through ice and looking at ice. We don't have this a lot in Western New York. You'll run into it if you're a backcountry skier in the Adirondacks. I've actually fell into one of these. It's called a tree well or a spruce trap. A lot of people don't know these actually occur. But when you get lots of snowpack, what happens is the snow won't go next to the trunk of the tree. And you're walking along, you go next to this tree, and then all of a sudden, I found myself 6 foot into a hole. It was quite comical to try to get out of with snowshoes on. It's a very dangerous situation for backcountry skiers because a lot of times they'll go into a spruce trap head first and asphyxiate if somebody can't save them, because you can't get out of it yourself usually because they are very deep. We don't really get that kind of snowpack here in Western New York, but if you go into the Adirondacks or up north, Sierras, we got somebody from the California. Sierras gets a lot of snow like this. Spruce traps are a real thing, and you can avoid them by staying on the trail. Just be careful around those trees. Final thing is just what to do in an emergency. I think I took this also from those folks, the search and rescue folks in British Columbia. They had this stop, think, observe, and plan. Assess the situation. Are you lost? Are you hurt? Is emergency care? Don't panic. Can you call 911? And I will always tell people technology is getting a lot better. The newer iPhones now have satellite communication with them. If you're iPhone 13 or better, or 14 or better, I can't remember. Android's coming with that. If you don't have a cell signal, still try to make a phone call and send a text, because a lot of times, even if it doesn't go through, if you're in place with no service, it might ping a tower and they'll be able to locate you based on that. And then, do we need to have help? Do we have the essentials to stay warm? Do we have that emergency bivvy if we have somebody that's immobile? Do we have layers to help them out with? And then there's lots of things to observe. The patient's condition. Is the weather changing? Is it going to get dark? Is it getting colder? As the sun sets, it's going to get colder. So that's the observe part of that. And then the final is just plan. How are you going to either build a shelter, stay warm, practice your fire building, have appropriate clothing for the conditions, have a turnaround time, make sure you have a plan, somebody that you told where you're going. Lots of stuff goes into the plan. And I think I got just a couple slides. Let me go and see if there was questions. I saw there was a couple questions. Remember the ears for coldness. Yes. Name of the book was called Vertical Aid. It's a couple mountaineering doctors. It's actually pretty good. Somebody actually answered that. Sorry. So I did post this to Facebook with some explanation. A lot of people don't know. We have multiple modes of travel during winter. We talked about snowshoes. We've got boots and microspikes. We also have cross-country skiers. And we also have these other things called groomed trails. There's a few places in Western New York that have it. And there's different rules depending on the park that grooms them. Some say no hikers on groomed trails at all. Others will allow you to go to the edges of those groomed trails, but we want to stay out of the ski track however possible. If they allow you on the groomed trail, you want to stay to the edge. If not, we're going to go outside that groomed trail with our boots or snowshoes. And then we have other situations where we don't have groomed trails. And really, this is can't be an all situations thing, because sometimes the trails are too narrow. However, it's a leave no trace, to be respectful to others and respect those different modes of transportations. If we have a really, really wide trail, skiers can have one track, snowshoers can have another track, boots can have another track. What we don't want to do with our boots is what's called post-holing. So that's when we step and we're ankle deep in the snow, and then we make another step, and it makes all of these deep holes that what happens is overnight, those holes freeze, and now they're called ankle breakers. You're going to be always, stepping in them, breaking your ankles as you're going, whether you're on snowshoes or on boots. So if you can, I'm not saying don't hike if you don't have snowshoes, but stay out of that single track if you can. Like, I know it might be some extra effort, but the snowshoers and the skiers will definitely appreciate that. You can't always do it. Sometimes you can't avoid it. If it gets packed enough and you're not leaving post holes, like the sole of your boot is the only thing going into the ground, by all means, walk through that single track. It's not going to, affect the snowshoers or the skiers. But it's just something to be aware of. It's an etiquette thing. It's not a rule. It will be a rule on some of the groomed places. Somebody mentioned Spraguebrook. They don't allow hikers on that trail, I don't believe. In the Art Roscoe Ski Center in Allegheny State Park, you can no longer hike those once they're groomed. Bond Lake grooms their trails, and it is a multi-use. So you see boots and snowshoes and skiers. So we all have to cooperate and, make the best conditions for each other. All right, we've come to the end. We'll do just a quick review and some questions and answers. So what did we talk about? Make a plan, share your plan with somebody, and stick to that plan. We're going to check that weather forecast. Make note of the sunset time because we don't want to be caught in the dark. But if we do get caught, we do have our 10 essentials, right? We have our headlamp and we have our backup headlamp. Everybody in our group has a whistle. And then we have all those other 10 essentials. And then those special cases for winter. We have extra layers. We need to take into account for stuff like our water bottles will be a little bit different. We have the extra traction devices. We're going to layer properly, use synthetic materials and wool. We're going to avoid cotton, whether it's 3 layers, 4 layers, might be 5 layers if you're really cold. Choose insulated boots for winter. Look for that grams of insulation, or if it's got a temperature rating. Also, half of that comfort and warmth is our socks. Look for darn tough socks. Buy our microspikes first, then look at snowshoes. Remember, water freezes. So we have to take into that account for, our nail jeans, our hydro flasks, everything else, water freezes. And if you do one thing as a word of caution as part of your 10 essentials, you don't want to put your water filtration device in your pack in the winter, whether it's a Sawyer or some other brand that has a micron filter. So water freezes. There's always water going to be trapped in that filter. And what does water do when it freezes? It expands. So what it does is it breaks down the micron holes and makes them bigger than micron, and basically makes your filter obsolete because it won't filter out the protozoa and bacteria the way it used to, because now the holes are bigger. So make sure you don't put your water filter in there. If you're going somewhere where you have to filter water, either put your water filter in your jacket or use an alternative, whether it's aqua tabs or drops or something along those lines to filter water. And then we have our cold related illnesses, frost nip, frostbite, and hypothermia. Remember, if we have pain and redness, we want to make sure we get our toes and our fingers warm. The nose is also a very common place. And as somebody mentioned, your ears are also common places to get frostbite first. So we want to protect those. If we start losing feeling and it starts feeling like frozen meat, we really want to get out really fast. On the hypothermia side of things, remember, shivering is our clue. If somebody's shivering, they have mild hypothermia. It's time to start thinking about evacuating, getting them warm, getting them out of there. And then we have that continuum of the umbles, the fumbles, mumbles, grumbles, stumbles happening. And then shivering is going to stop. When shivering stops, we're in a high level of danger for that person. They need to be evacuated and warmed very quickly. So know that. And then that acronym STOP, to if you do get lost, don't panic. You know, use your brain, and don't panic. You'll figure out your situation. Okay, so that's a review. And now I will turn it over to lots of questions, hopefully. Okay, question. How do you attach the snowshoes to your backpack? Yes, good question. So I will just happen to have my backpack here, and your backpack, it might vary. So there's a couple ways you can do it that I've seen. Let me just get this zipped up a little bit. All right, so my backpack, my new backpack doesn't have a brain. So one way you could do it, I never really liked this way, but I've seen people do it, is if you have that brain flap, people put their snowshoes right here, put the brain over the top, and walk with them perpendicular, parallel to their shoulders on the back of their backpack. I never liked that method. I've always tried to strap them to my pack. And you can do it two ways. You can do it on the sides. So I've seen some people successfully do it on the side of their backpack like this. Okay, so both of them are facing, let me get the other one to show you what it would look like. And the challenge is going to be based on your backpack, how you're going to get it to stay. So a lot of people will do it like this, right? Two like this, and strap it to something here. You know, the backpacks have a lot of different connection parts that you can strap it. Another method that I use more often is I put them on top of each other like this, and then try to strap it to the back of my backpack like that. So now you ask, how do you strap it to the backpack, right? So there's two different places, and your backpack is going to have different connection points. How do you strap it? So I for many, many years, I used these Sea to Summit straps. They work really well. However, more recently, I've moved to these things. So these are those long, I don't know what you call them, bendable straps. You can twist them together. These ones I think are, I don't know, like 18 inches, 2 feet. Try to get the biggest, longest ones you can. And what I do with these is, we'll take the pack, right? And then I'll feed this through a binding on the outside one. And then, you know, I haven't actually done this on this pack yet, so I don't know where there's connections, but there's a couple connections up here. So I'll just put them through these connections. Oh, there's only one on that side. Ah, that's okay. There's other places to connect. Usually your backpack will usually have a bunch of different options. So let me just put these straps in place real quick. We'll get them strapped up. Oh, I do have connection on the other side. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong place. So I just put it through, twist it, put it through a connection point here. There's just some loops that I'm just putting these through, as you can see right here. And then you just twist it. You can put the second one, find another loop down here. You know, either for your water, where your water bottle goes, is where I'm going on this side. The water bottle straps. We'll do it on this side. I'll kind of show you what that looks like. It's kind of sloppy. But you see, I went through the water bottle strap up here. I went through an upper connection point up here. And now I have them strapped on my backpack like that. And if I wanted to use the other method, I could do it. I would probably recommend using 4 of these then, 2 for each side, just so they don't bounce around. But you could certainly do the exact same thing with these straps, these bungee pliable, I don't know what they're called, but I'll put a link to it in the email that I'll send. But I can definitely find connection places to do the exact same thing to strap it like that.
Are they pipe cleaners?
No, not well. They're rubber.
I
You
mean,
know,
those, yeah, those things. Oh, okay.
yeah, they're like rubber. I don't know if I can get it to focus on it. You know, it's rubber. It's got a tip, but I can twist it around. I can tie them. You can tie them together like this if you need to. I'll send a link. I'll send the link to them. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them at Lowe's. They're really really common kind of things. But a gentleman, his name's Aaron Slossman. He's in the Adirondack Club, Adirondack Mountain Club with me. Um, he recommended these once, and I'm like, that is genius, and they work great. Much like I struggled with these. Like it's not too bad to strap it on, but when you have gloves on and that kind of stuff, and have to take the gloves off to feed this through, it's a little bit harder. These you can do with gloves on, and I haven't found a backpack. Like I said, this is a brand new backpack, and I was able to figure out where to strap it on in real time here. Is silk a good base layer? I've never heard of silk being a base layer. I've seen some new stuff coming out that they're using. Um, I don't know what the material is, but it's actually like it's like a mesh base layer. There's some people on YouTube testing it out, and I don't know if it's actually worthwhile. Merino wool is the go-to, is what I would suggest.
If we're new to Buffalo, where are some good beginner places to go that aren't too
Ah,
like do you have sites that you recommend for
I
looking
absolutely.
specifically for snowshoeing?
Well, typically
So
for snowshoeing. So let me share something. So I'll do a shameless plug. So if you're new to Buffalo, I'd suggest doing the winter hiking challenge because you're going to get a list of a bunch of trails rated from easy to difficult, and they're in order on this sheet. Uh, I've been revealing trails every week, so you get the whole, because you came to this class, you get the whole trails for the whole challenge today. But they're rated from easy to hard, and um, you're going to get a digital map. So it'll help. You can use your phone with an app called Avenza, and you won't get lost. Any of these places I would recommend. I don't know if you're from the South Towns, North Towns. If you're new to Buffalo, the South Towns gets a lot more snow than the North Towns. So if you get to Orchard Park, like Chestnut Ridge, East Aurora is like Hunters Creek, Beaver Meadow Nature Center. I'm trying to think, Knox Farm. Go a little bit farther south, there's Sprague Brook and Erie County Forest. That's in Colden. They get a lot of snow down there. Zor Valley gets a lot of snow. Um, Ellicottville, as you get farther south, you're going to get more and more snow. Hamburg, there's 18 Mile Creek. We've got a lot, we had a bunch of snow just recently. Um, but yeah, you got to kind of get south of the city when there's a major snow, and you'll get snow. But I'd recommend, the hiking challenge. It'll show you lots of parks and give you all the tools and maps necessary to visit them safely. And another Easter egg, there's something new if you're into the hiking challenges, something new coming in 2025. Okay, question. This has been wonderful. Good. I appreciate that this was helpful. Sign up for the winter hiking challenge. No, we can. So a challenge starts the 21st, December 21st. Registration is open on the 20th. So not yet. Got to wait a week. There's a birding challenge starting this weekend though. So if you want to get into birding, there's a winter birding challenge. So even if you're a new birder, you can step through the tasks and become a more expert birder. Any other questions on gear or other things that I didn't cover that you were expecting to cover? Um, Anyone? Buffs are my favorite. Highly recommend buffs. I think that's another good takeaway from here.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. If you do think of anything, I'm always available. Send me an email. I'll send you guys a follow-up email with some of the links that we talked about tonight. Definitely the link to these bungees, right? If I've missed something, let me know. I'll also have the recording for this if you do want to view it another time. And hopefully we'll see you outside. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the hiking challenge. And I'm pretty excited. It's the first winter using our new app, and the first time we're combining the regions between Rochester and Buffalo. So that's also a good reason to get in. All right. Don't fear the snow. Don't fear the cold. It's a great time to get out. My favorite time to get out. Once you do it, people that have done the hiking challenge have said, oh, I used to hate the winter and now I look forward to the winter because I can, see these beautiful places in a different season and, experience the different things. So definitely get out there in winter, give it a try. You have the tools and the safety things that you have to, look out for gear and that kind of stuff. So just get yourself out there and give it a try. You'll love it. All right, everybody. Good class. Thank you very much. And we'll see you outside.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.